Red Sox extend their winning streak but lose in the final game of the series against the Phillies.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Jake Ignaszewski, and here, as always, with my co-host, NESN's Lauren Willand. And I hope that throughout this weekend, you enjoyed the nice sun. Luckily and hopefully, we have the rain in the rear view mirror after a week long of pouring rain. It was definitely tough to have a smile on your face, but it's been nice to have a smile on your face if you're watching the Red Sox over the last few days or so. They had a 7-game winning streak going into Sunday's game, snapped that after Sunday's loss to the Phillies, but still ended up winning the series 2-3 against Philadelphia and have won 6 of their last 7 series. Can't complain.
No, we're seeing a lot of good baseball right now, and we saw a lot of good baseball in those first 2 games of the series with the Phillies. On Sunday, it kind of came to a halt. You only had Costas with the homer, and then the pitching kind of struggled there. So, I mean, you're not gonna sweep every single series. It was fun while it lasted, but they're winning series, which is something that they could not do last year. And yes, it's May. It's still early in the season, but there's still a lot of good to take away from these games and this last series in particular.
And Sunday was the first day, too, where the offense kind of took a hold.
Yeah.
Even, MLB Network, when they were covering the Phillies and Red Sox game, I saw a video of JP Morosi, speaking flying colors of this Red Sox offense. And it really seemed like, especially early on in this series, a different guy was doing it every single game. Somebody was coming up clutch that you didn't really expect. And then, in Sunday's game, only were able to muster 1 run. And that was a Tristan Casas home run. And it's nice to see the rookie finally starting to get the gears flowing, has reached base safely in each of his last 18 games. And obviously has still struggled a little bit with the strikeout stuff. But when you see him, showcase that power and continue to find ways to get on base, whether it's through the walk or just getting nice base hits, you got to be happy that you're at least seeing some positive progression throughout the last few weeks.
Yeah, and this is the thing with someone like him. It's his first Major League Baseball season. He would have made his debut sooner last year had he not gotten injured, and that the high ankle sprain really kind of hindered his development for a little while there. And now it's his first. He got a whole off season and a whole spring training with the Red Sox. Now he's coming into these games. He's getting into a groove. He's finding his kind of pace at the plate, and he's a very he's a man of routine. We saw him. What was it in the Blue Jays series? I think it was when he stood in the batter's box and while the injury was going on, so we could get more time and visualize things. He's a very visual person, kind of like JD Martinez. JD Martinez was a very visual person. He called himself a trained hitter, constantly looking at his batting practices and everything. So it's when you're able to see the field a bit more, especially with that pitch clock now, and that's what Costas had said, that with the pitch clock, he can't visualize a lot of what he would be able to had there not be, if there was no pitch clock. So I do really like what I've seen from him. And I like the patience. We've seen that patience. We see the on-base percentage. It's obviously working. That patience is working because he's getting on base. But now to see him, hit the ball, get the ball in play. He's had some really nice drives too. I mean, a few days ago at Fenway, just a little bit windier, he would have had a grand slam. So he's really starting to see the ball a lot better than he was a month ago. And I think that it's only going to keep getting better. And little by little, that batting average will get a little bit higher.
Another guy that has already a high batting average is continuously getting on base and extended his hitting streak to 16 games after Sunday's game. It's Masataka Yoshida. And it was really cool outside of the baseball games to see Yoshida sort of fanboy a little bit with Bryce Harper. I even mentioned this, I don't think on the podcast, but Harper's my favorite MLB player. I grew up, watching him, the 16-year-old phenom on Sports Illustrated. I mean, I think any kid that grew up playing baseball, in the early 2000s, emulated their game off of Bryce Harper and looked up to him. And, for Yoshida, ended up, naming his dog after Harper. And it was cool to see, Harper gift him 2 autographed bats, one that was used in the NLCS last year, and also some cleats. And you could just see Yoshida get a little bit giddy. I think he even called him his little treasures, which I thought was cool.
Stuff like that is so wholesome because these players too, they're fans of other players, and they're, Yoshida, for somebody to be able to come over to MLB after playing in Japan for so long and getting able to meet his idol and the person that he absolutely loves watching was really, really cool. And I think Harper, I mean, obviously he gave him the bats and the cleats, and I think that Harper doesn't, he doesn't take that for granted no matter who it is, because Yoshida's a star in Japan, and now he's, now they're buds, now they've met, and it's, Yoshida can kind of check that off of his bucket list, which I think is very cool. When you see interactions like that, it's just very wholesome, and it's like stuff like that is bigger than baseball and just makes me happy, because like you get to see a side of these players. Like you said, he was giddy and almost like a little kid, meeting their idol, and it's just so wholesome. I love it. I need more of those moments.
Yeah, me too. And, it was cool, even as a Red Sox fan, it was cool to see Bryce Harper back on the field, only spent a tiny bit of time on the IL after he got Tommy John surgery. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but I think it was around 160 days.
I think it was 159.
159. Oh, it was close. But Chris Sale even said, he's like, he's making us look bad. Like, I got to learn how he figured out to get back on the field so quickly. Obviously, a pitcher who uses his arm for essentially his job on a baseball field, right, compared to Harper, who's, able to play DH or play first base while it still recovers and everything like that. But, that definitely put on a little bit of a layer of competition to this series. As we already mentioned, luckily the Sox were able to take 2 of those games. But outside of, the loss on Sunday, Tanner Houck ended up was on the mound in that loss, but he looked relatively good. Still allowed 3 earned runs, 5 hits, 5 and 2/3 innings, and then struck out 4. But luckily, you didn't see him really struggle too much like we have usually, in those later innings. Did allow 2 earned runs in the 4th. But I am still curious to see sort of how this rotation is really stacked up once we see Paxton be activated in the next few days, which we're going to talk a little bit more into that later on. But here's your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think Tanner Houck, it wasn't his best performance. We've seen him at his worst. I mean, we've seen worse than what we saw Sunday, absolutely. But I still think he got into some trouble. He loaded the bases, and while it didn't hurt him tremendously, or it could have been much worse, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I still think that this is somebody who maybe should go into the bullpen once this rotation is quote unquote fully healthy, or you have all your starters in the fold here. And yes, I know that they wanted Houck as a starter, but I think that he would serve you better in the bullpen. And I still think that way about Whitlock, but that's, like I said, I don't want them going from starter to bullpen to starter. I want them to have their defined roles. But I think after Sunday, I like that Houck has really, done everything that he can to be a serviceable starter. I just think he's more valuable in the bullpen. And I think that the Red Sox should really, once Paxton gets activated, and not saying that Paxton is going to come in and like be the savior of this rotation. I don't think the pitching is all that bad. It needs to be better, yes. But, and not to say Paxton could be much worse than Tanner Houck. So there's a lot of what ifs here. But I think that when Paxton comes back, I do think Tanner Houck is the odd man out, so to say, to go into the bullpen. And I'd be okay with that, because he can be really good in a shorter span, innings 1, 2, 3. And then all of a sudden, we've talked about this, his last start, I believe, that 4th and 5th inning where he started to kind of not fall apart, but started to struggle. Batters started to figure him out. So maybe the bullpen will be better suited for him. I'm not Alex Cora. I'm not making these decisions. But if you want some advice, he should call me, you, someone. Yeah. We're here. We're here for advice. It's free.
We're here. We'll put the number in the
Monday
description.
through Friday on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. LO_Red Sox.
That's so funny. But the other thing that I think really hurt the Red Sox pitching too was Kyle Schwarber finally woke up. I think he was 0 for 20, going into Sunday's game, and ended up going 2 for 3 during that loss, and hit a home run off of Richard Blyer, which it's tough to see, essentially, since Blyer's on this team and essentially in the bullpen to be a lefty specialist, to get lefties out. And he wasn't able to do that against Schwarber. And then we also saw, new Red Sox reliever Zack Littell get a little bit roughed up there in the 8th as well. Allowed 2 earned runs, walked 2 batters as well. And one thing that I was my first reaction when I was watching the game is, why are you throwing a ball right down the middle to JT Realmuto with the bases loaded? And we're going to speak more about the trade that the Red Sox made for Littell a little bit later in the episode, but just a little bit of a sneak peek. He told the Rangers, since he was in AAA, like, if you don't call me up, trade me. And now that he's in the majors, we're already starting to see him struggle a little bit and not being able to shut down the door. And, it was just very difficult for me to understand why you throwing that pitch right there with bases loaded against the best offensive catcher in the league.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like I don't have much to add to that other than it was, it's one outing. Yes, we would have liked to see something better, especially, like trade me or bring me up to the majors. Did he have an upward movement clause? Did he also have one of those, or am I thinking of someone else?
I would be surprised.
It's one start, so I'm not gonna, or one outing. I'm not gonna sit here and like overreact, but yeah, that's not a pitch you can throw to really anyone, but especially JT Realmuto. You cannot throw that pitch to him. And then you're up here, you're in a situation where the game is still winnable for the Red Sox, and it's just like, what are we doing? And I don't think he's the answer to, be in this bullpen. He might be the reason Ryan Brazier gets saved another round of DFAs or anything, something like that. But you just wish you saw more and saw. I think that's really my biggest takeaways. I wish I saw more, but one start, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be rational, but that won't be able to. I won't be able to say the same if that kind of trend continues, because buddy, we went through this last year and we're not doing it again this year.
Exactly. And, we're going to speak more not only about, the 2 other games that the Red Sox played against the Phillies in this series, but also more about the Littell trade in our second segment. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you about eBay Motors. And so for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And, you spoke about it with Littell, in our last segment. It's one outing. Can't overreact. And I think you could kind of say this a little bit about from what we saw from Chris Sale. Over these last few starts, it's tough to not overreact in these different outings and, read too much into things, especially from, what we saw in the Twins start. And then, he blew up in his next start, and it's kind of been back and forth. But, just fast forwarding a little bit to game 1, Sale struck out 10, went 6 innings. Even though, he struggled a little bit later on in that outing and ended up, ultimately allowing 3 earned runs. It was nice to see him having that strikeout stuff back. And it seems like his only struggles come against the Orioles.
It's funny how much he struggles against the Orioles. And we kind of see that with like Rafael Devers and Garrett Cole, right? Like it's just funny how pitchers struggle against specific teams. But the thing with Sale too is that he hasn't pitched consecutively and for 3 years. Mm-hmm. So he's got to really get back into that groove. So probably, I wouldn't be surprised if through May we kind of see a little bit more up and down, but the 10 strikeout performance, the 11 strikeout performance last week or the week before, I think is, that's kind of where he's going to be this year. And no, we're not going to get 10 strikeouts every single outing, but he's getting better and he's just building that arm strength. And he's kind of at that age too, where, you have to kind of start making those adjustments. And he doesn't exactly know what those adjustments are because he hasn't pitched in those 3 years. He hasn't been able to make those kinds of adjustments at his age, and that other pitchers are able to do when they come back from injury and just kind of have, or maybe even if they're not injured, they're able to just kind of, go through their career. And as they get older, make those specific adjustments. So now that he's kind of in that, and maybe he's really figuring out the mechanics, what he can and can't do, what needs to be done differently. that's what's going to make him dominant. Or maybe I'm going to stick with dominant. That's what's going to make him dominant, a dominant pitcher in this rotation. But to see his last performance or his last outing, that was encouraging. That was something that, we saw a lot of like almost vintage Sale there. We saw him throw a little fit on the mound, hit himself in the head. We saw him, get heated, and we saw him strike out 10 batters. So we saw a little bit of everything. And I was like, this man hates when he messes up more than anything. And we see it in real time. But I think we're starting to get closer and closer to what Chris Sale is going to be for the rest of the season.
And you love that out of your pitcher. I think that's outside of the dominance that we've seen on the mound from Chris Sale since he came over, in 2018, is that sort of fire that he brings on the mound and that energy that he brings not only when he succeeds, but also when he fails as well. Everybody, I bet when I said that, you always go back to the Worcester game where he had his little fit. But, now you got to see it, outside of just on a phone camera. You got to see it on NESN on TV. And, I think the other part of it, too, is his control. It was on point, 10 strikeouts, as I mentioned, only walked one batter. And that's what you want to see from him, when not only his slider, his fastball, and the rest of his pitches are on point. We see that strikeout number get higher and higher. In his last start had 5 strikeouts. In the start against the Orioles, where he really struggled, had 0. And, then before that, there was 11 with the Twins. And so I hope we are able to consistently, maybe not see 10 every single start, but, if he's able to limit the damage in terms of earned runs and, walks, and he's able to get up to 7 or 8 consistently throughout each start, I think you can't be upset with the output that you're getting from Sale. And, another guy, sticking with the starting rotation talk, Corey Kluber as well, even though he allowed 3 earned runs, struggled a little bit, as we've seen throughout this season with him. But I think the one thing that you got to be happy with Kluber, 0 walks. That's what you ask from him. You ask for the good control and the ability to just get outs.
Yeah, the no walks is good. I'm still not sold on Kluber. I think it's more. I just want more. Like, I just want more from him. I expect more from him. I think the Red Sox and their fans expect more from him. But I can see that it feels like he's getting better just at a snail's pace. But I'm also just like, how long of a leash does this guy have? Especially if Paxton comes back and can not look like how he did in Worcester. Maybe that one time that he was like very, very good in Worcester, but not the last 2 or 3 times that he pitched there. But I just want more from him. Yes, the no walks is very good because the walks got the Red Sox in trouble a lot last year. But I don't know. I just want more. I feel like he doesn't look confident on the mound, as confident as I'd like him to. And I don't know. I guess that I just expected more from him, and I don't really know why I expected more from him. I mean, he's older, he's old in terms of athletes, even though he's not that much older than me. Like, it's a walking miracle when somebody's in their late 30s. So some of it's his age, yes, but I still expect more from somebody who's done so much in this league throughout his career.
Me too. And, it's easy to bring up the age, and it's easy to look at all these different numbers or all these sabermetrics on, his velocity going down, his control being off. But I think when you see any sort of glimmer of progression with Kluber, you just got to sort of, in my mind, be happy, because he kind of reminds me of Pavetta. He is what he is at this point. I don't know if we're going to see him get much, much better throughout the season. I hope so. That'd be really nice. But, the other thing that I wanted to bring up with this series is, it was really nice to see Rafael Devers continuing to show off his improved defense. We not only saw, that diving play earlier in the series, but also in Sunday's game, ended up muffing a ball with the bases loaded and then just ended up diving at the runner who was running to third base and got him in a split second. And especially with those types of plays, even though the game wasn't super duper close at that point, those plays matter. And being able to see Devers not only continue to improve his defense, but also continuing to lead the MLB in categories like RBIs. He has 34, leads all of the MLB and is tied for second in home runs with 11. When he's doing the offensive stuff, which you already expect, he's doing the defensive stuff, it means that the extension was not only worth it, but you're getting the value that you pretty much expected.
And you want the defense to keep improving, because that's kind of been the narrative around him, is that the defense isn't quite where it probably should be, especially with someone who's been in the league as long as he has. Yes, he's still young, but at this point, it's just kind of feels like that maybe it should be a little bit more. But you see these plays that he makes, and you mentioned some of them. And then it's weird because he'll bobble a routine ground ball, or he just gets confused or something. And listen, it's a fast, not the fastest game, but in the split second that you have to decide, it's a quick process. I get it, but you have to cheer when he makes these amazing like Gold Glove-esque plays, and you're like, what the hell are you doing with that same glove that you can't get the routine ground ball? But I'm not going to sit here and cherry pick because I like what I've seen from him this year, and the defense I think is huge. I think he's improved immensely, not just from the start of this year to the first month of the season, but just from last year as well. I think we're seeing a grown-up Rafael Devers on defense, and I think it will continue to improve. Like I just mentioned, he's young, but he's been in the league long enough where it's a matter of just like making those adjustments, and I think he will. And I think we're starting to see that, and it's fun. It's fun watching those kinds of plays, and it's fun watching that quick thinking. And he's kind of like a goober, like when he has like those funny, like sometimes he'll just sit on like the base sometimes, or he'll like stay stretched out every now and then. So it's just like it adds a little like more fun to it, where he's just like, as soon as he's exhaling, like all the fans are exhaling, like, yeah, he did that.
And even Kike too, he made a nice diving play in this series, and then also had a little bit of a smirk 2 days ago. And it was tough to not, laugh at some of the memes that, people put out on Twitter from the pick. Mine was, when the Red Sox are exceeding everybody's expectations, just sort of the smirk of, what you're seeing. You can't not, acknowledge it, even though you want to ignore it. But one thing we can't ignore, and it's tough to, I feel like it's going back and forth with the injury stuff. There's guys coming back, there's excitement, and then 2 seconds later, they just keep on piling up. So we got a few different injuries. Cutter Crawford got put on the IL with a left hamstring strain. Caleb Ort replaced him on the roster, but then due to the Zack Littell trade, which we'll speak about in a sec, Ort was sent back down. And then Christian Arroyo, who we've seen his hamstring bother him over these last few days or so. He just hasn't really looked right either on defense or when he's running the bases. But he got placed on the IL with a hamstring strain as well. But I want to speak specifically about Arroyo because, he's somebody who made an impact in this game, in this series. Went 2 for 4 with an RBI in the second game, and then has also really heated up at the plate. And it always seems like with him, this is already his second injury on the season, and we're at May 8th. And this is his chance to fully show that he can be an everyday player in the majors. And it just seems like anytime he gets going, he has to get sidelined once again.
I think that kind of proves that maybe he can't be an everyday player. And, he was removed from the game last week with that hamstring tightness. And I felt like it was inevitable at that point that he was going to go on the IL. And it's unfortunate because I don't want anyone to try to be this everyday player and then get hurt doing so. And he wasn't even playing every day. But when he was in that lineup, it was that 2 for 4 game, like everyone was contributing and he was part of that. And it's unfortunate. Thankfully, it doesn't sound like it's going to be serious, but you never know with hamstrings. Hamstrings are very, very tricky. But I think that he is what he is. I think he's not, unfortunately, I don't know. He's not an everyday player, but he can be somebody who can be useful off the bench as long as he's healthy. And that's the big asterisk right there, as long as he's healthy.
Right. And, I think for somebody like him, we've talked about it, all season long with the rotation and even the bullpen too, the logjam that there is, and especially just on the 40-man depth chart. And especially with Mondesi coming back, in a month or so, it's going to be interesting to see how everything does play out in terms of who the Red Sox keep and, who is the last man out. And, maybe they play around with a few different things, put somebody on IL and they're not actually like injured, to try and play around with it. Who knows? But I think, this isn't a great time for Arroyo to get injured. This was his time to show that he's a necessity to this team. That's sort of what any player wants to be, to where there's no sort of thought on if they deserve to stay on this team, whether they get traded, sent down, or whatever. And, it was just tough to see a guy who's just starting to get going and contributing to the team go down. But, we've spoken about Zack Littell throughout this episode a few times. I bet who the heck is this guy? Well, the Red Sox traded for him for cash considerations from the Rangers. And, I spoke about it a little bit in the first segment about how, he said to the Rangers, well, if you don't call me up, if you don't give me a chance in the majors, then trade me. And so he ended up, pitching 8 games so far in AAA this year as a reliever, had a 2.25 ERA, and the righty has played 5 seasons in the MLB and recently pitched in 2022 for the San Francisco Giants, had a 5.08 ERA over 39 games. And you might remember this went around, viral all last year. Littell's a pitcher who ended up yapping at Gabe Kapler while he was walking off the mound and sort of jawed at him, probably upset that he was getting taken out. And he was a guy who was sort of a fringe AAA, fringe major league player. And, it says something when right after he did that, he got sent right down to AAA. And, the first thing when I saw this move, I realized who the guy was. And this was when the Red Sox were on their winning streak. The only thing that came to my mind is, all right, the Red Sox are driving right now. They have incredible energy. This guy better not screw it up.
Yeah, and I don't think somebody like him could screw it up. I mean, I completely understand you can bring someone in who has a crappy attitude and he can kind of bring down the morale of the team, but I just don't think he kind of has that ability. And that maybe that sounds kind of mean, but
I agree with you.
The thing is like, if you're mad about getting taken out, if you're, you want to say something to your manager about getting taken out a bit early, then pitch better. Like it's that simple. Pitch better. He's, like you said, he's this fringe guy. He's on like AAA guy, sometimes in the MLB, but it's just pitch better. If you want to start, going at your manager, if you want to start making these ultimatums, then you need to prove it. You need to be a better pitcher. And sure, getting him for cash considerations is nothing. Like, great. Like it's like a low risk, high reward kind of thing. But yeah, you saw, we've seen the energy with this team over the win streak and winning these series and just kind of how it seems to have shifted a little bit. And you definitely don't want that to, you don't want one person to interfere with that. I don't think that he has the advantage to do that. I don't think that he could. I think that this team is too close for that to happen. But, just pitch better, man. Then you'll have an argument there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. He doesn't really have not only the pedigree, but the power to sway the clubhouse in any which way or the other.
Right.
But it was more of just the selfishness. That was the one thing that in my opinion was exuded or shown in that sort of video from last year. And I when I saw the move, the first thing that I thought about was not only that, but also that Alex Cora is probably the best manager that he could essentially have, and sort of tell him straight up, leave the selfishness at the door. Be part of the team when you walk into this clubhouse and when you play for the Boston Red Sox. And so, obviously he's only made one outing thus far, and curious to see how everything does play out. But I think even though he struggled in the outing, we spoke about it in the first segment. I'm just curious to see what he brings to this bullpen. And I think especially, with not only him added, but Bernardino as well. And especially with them in my mind, in the past performing better than Ryan Brazier has so far. I think this just gives the Red Sox 2 more guys to essentially maybe put over Brazier. And, who knows how many options Littell has left on his contract. Obviously, he was in AAA to begin the season. But just curious to see how it all does play out. And, I hope, as I bet any Red Sox fan does, or any move that the Red Sox make, I just hope it's a W for Heim. I just hope it's not another loss that hurts the team. That's all I care about. At the end of the day, just need to stack up these dubs. And, I think especially with what we spoke about with injuries, we'll speak a little bit more about the positive side with some guys rehabbing and starting to come back. We spoke about Joey Rodriguez and his rehab outing, last week. He made another one, which was a scoreless inning. We gave up a weak single to the first hitter and then a bunt ground out and then struck out the next 2 batters. So definitely excited to have him back. We'll definitely be able to add a reliable left-handed arm in the Red Sox bullpen. And then James Paxton, we've already brought him up once in this episode, but he will reportedly join the Red Sox in Atlanta during their next series. Cora said that he plans to insert him in the rotation, but not in Atlanta. And Cora did not rule out a 6-man rotation. You brought up his struggles in his last start in Worcester, and I was at that game. It was not pretty to watch. He pitched 5 innings through 96 pitches, allowed 2 earned runs. Now, those aren't the stats that were concerning. It was the 5 walks, and it was actually interesting because if you haven't been paying attention at least to AAA baseball, they have the ABS system. So it's essentially the automated balls and strikes. And, the ump still does their thing, but, it's kind of like what we saw with Jason Dominguez in the Arizona Fall League. You can tap your head and that'll essentially, cause a challenge, and it'll show it up on like the video board, where the ball is. And if it hits any sort of part of the edge of the strike zone, it's called a strike. Paxton did that 3 times and he lost all of them. So I know he was probably trying to take advantage of the system, but at the same time, if that doesn't show you that he was desperate to get a strike, he was desperate to get a strike. He struck out 4 batters as well, but definitely that command is not what you wanted to see after his last outing.
Yeah, you definitely don't. You want to see the Paxton that we saw with the middle outing when he looked really, really good and he was strong on the mound. And hopefully that just getting him back to the majors, maybe just kind of working off all that rust. Hopefully that's all he needs. But I think that he'll have a short leash. I did think it was interesting when Cora was like, he's going to be in the rotation, but not in Atlanta, where it's like, okay, I know you want to kind of get him the innings and you may get him like a little worked out before you go into the starting rotation. But it's also like, again, these defined roles for these guys. Let's figure them out sooner rather than later before you're jumbled and all of a sudden all your pitchers are overworked because you had no idea what to do with the rotation in the bullpen. Yep. Especially if they continue, the play they keep up now, if this is sustainable and they end up, being in the hunt for a wild card or even, I doubt it, but second place in the AL East. You don't want to have your pitchers go into September and October burnt out.
Yeah, I agree. And my big thing with Paxton, in my opinion, he's the most valuable trade chip that you got potentially in this rotation, right? You're not going to trade Kluber. Like I don't see them wanting to trade Houck or Pivetta doesn't really have too much value in my opinion. But Paxton finds a way to, surprise everybody with that $4 million price tag. I think he's the perfect guy to sort of trade during the deadline. Not to say you're going to get a huge haul from him by any means, but could definitely be able to help you get, better starting pitcher depth, pair him with a guy like, I nobody really comes to mind immediately, but just finding a way to see what value you do have in him, how he can contribute to this team in this rotation. And I feel like all we're hoping as Red Sox fans is just to sort of see some sort of glimpse of what we saw, with the Yankees and, his season with the Mariners, right before he went down with TJ. But all in all, I think a lot of Red Sox fans are just finally excited to see James Paxton in a Red Sox uniform because they only saw him, one inning in Fort Myers. I was at that game. It was a split second. And then every other outing, outside of when he's been in Worcester, he hasn't even finished the game. So just excited for him to finish a game in the major leagues finally again. And, it's been 2 years coming. So hopefully he can make some sort of impact for this Red Sox team. But greatly appreciate everybody tuning into this episode. But before we end this, Lauren and I have some unfortunate news. It's been a very great and positive episode, but it's going to get a little bit somber at this point. But I'm sad to announce that myself, this is going to be my last week with the Locked On Red Sox podcast. Lauren, she's going to be with the podcast for 2 more weeks. But I'll let you say something in a sec. But for me, it's been an incredible experience. I'm really excited for these next 4 days of just being able to still connect with the listeners. I'm going to speak more about it in, my last episode on Friday. But, all I'm going to say is, I'm never going to stop talking about the Sox. I'm going to keep talking about them, not only on Twitter, but, in a podcast capacity on my own personal podcast. But, all in all, just excited for to end the ride on a high note and continue to talk about the Sox for the next week or so.
Yeah, what a ride it's been. Unfortunately, I also am leaving Locked On Red Sox. My last show will air on May 22nd. So I have a week after when Jake is no longer with us, but it has been so fun to relaunch this podcast and just kind of be able to go through the ups and downs, go through a really fun 2021 and a really bad 2022. It's been fun to, build this podcast, come on here, talk about the Red Sox every day, and to interact with our everydayers, with our people on Twitter, with people who we're not here without the people who support us. So I'm very sad to be leaving. I'll also speak more about the next chapter when the time comes. But you'll all know still where to find me and everything. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. Still gonna talk about the Red Sox as well. And it's, you'll still be able to hear me on podcasts, and just not every day, but it has been so fun, to say the very least. And we'll say more. We don't want to take up too much of your time. Well, we will say more as the end draws near. That sounds very ominous, but just thank you. It's been fun, and I'm bummed to be leaving. Jake, you've been an awesome co-host and a better friend, and it's been a hell of a ride. And I'm excited for both of us for what comes next.
Yeah, and I feel like it was. I know you agree with this too, but I feel like it was best to say this to start the week, and it wasn't sort of a situation where we get to Friday's episode. Just so you know, you're not gonna see me after this. I felt like it was necessary for the amount of support that you guys have given us, and not only all the support that we receive on Twitter, but even if you've seen us in public and let us know that you watched the episodes, it's really cool for both of us, I know, and we really do appreciate you taking the time each and every single day. But we're going to make this week the best week possible that we've had together as co-hosts. And if you want to continue to tune into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, not only throughout this next week, but just for the foreseeable future, even with the new hosts and everything like that, make sure to tune into the Locked On Red Sox podcast 5 days a week. Make sure to subscribe over on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we want to thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now, for my everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we have a exclusive interview with a Red Sox prospect, and I'm not going to announce that until tomorrow's episode, so you're going to have to make sure to tune into that. But if you want to stay tuned on everything that's happening regarding the podcast, make sure to follow Locked On Red Sox over on Twitter. It's LO_Red Sox. Myself, it's at Jake Iggy, and also Lauren, it's La 3 Laws, Lauren with 4 R's. Almost screwed that up. We've been doing this for a year and a half.
I don't know how that happened. Now.
I don't know how that happened, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Well, on this episode, how we always edit, keep the faith, stay positive, and let's go Sox.